Hello and welcome to another Fan the Flames live with me, creative director Robert Stevenson. Here at Fan the Flames, we believe that everybody has a spark, everybody has potential, and it's our work, our passion to turn those sparks into roaring fires. And today, I'm joined with the roaring fire herself, Marina Oswald. Marina is, well, she describes herself as a confidence coach. I think she's so much more than that because having worked with her and been in her orbit for maybe 2 years now, it's there's more to confidence than I originally thought because she brings a real awareness of who we are and what's going on for us. But one of the beautiful things that she does is that she doesn't just talk about being confident. She doesn't just talk about moving through your fear. She does it. So she's looking at what are the things that are fearful for me and let me go and do those things so I can learn from that. Hence our conversation today about wisdom through fear. Marina, it's great to have you with me on the show today.
Robert, thank you so much for having me. And what an intro. Yes, living through fear every day.
I love it because I tell you one of the things that I love about how you show up with this idea of living through fear is that when we think about the word fear, we could be fearful. So you could show up in a fearful state in the world. But that's not how you show up. You know, things might be frightening or cause anxiety or whatever emotion we want to talk about, but you kind of show up ready to face them. It's like you're almost embracing that fear, embracing that challenge and going, right, okay, I'm whatever word you might use in that. I'm anxious, I'm shitting myself, I'm scared out my pants, but I'm gonna go for this and I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna see what I learn through this.
Absolutely. And it's, as you say, it's choosing to step into that. And it is scary, you know, that is why we hold back from stepping into fear, because it's scary. There's that voice in our head saying, no, don't do it. You don't know what's going to happen. But the whole, you know, I love it. We're diving right into the middle of this conversation. You know, why do we step into fear? Why am I choosing to step into fear every day? And it's because the wisdom is within that fear. It is the other side of that step. So this is all about changing our narrative around fear, turning it into something that there's so much to learn through it. So now I'm like, where's the fear? Bring it on. Like, what do you have for me? Let's go.
And I would imagine that when you embrace life like that, there's a whole different kind of energy that shows up because you know I love when you talk about changing the narrative. I'm a narrative geek. I love that whole idea of what's the story that we are telling and how can we change that story to meet our needs, our desires. And when you show up in this kind of right, what have you got for me? I guess that sends a really different signal to others, to the world, to the universe about who you are. You're not somebody who's going to step back. You're going to step up and lean into whatever it is that's happening.
Well, Robert, I feel that through life, this beautiful opportunity we have to be on this earth, we are going to go through challenge and fear, whether we like it or not. So we can passively sit back, let it come to us, quake in our boots, or choose actively to step forward on a specific fear. We're still quaking our boots, but this is the choice. I'm stepping towards this, and it's about learning, firstly, the understanding. Okay, why do I have this fear? What does fear mean? Understanding it and using things in which to alleviate it, make it easier. So that, as we said, the first one is changing the narrative, but it's also being aware that yes, I'm still going to quake in my boots. I'm still going to have that sort of shortness of breath, and my body is still going to be like, no, don't do this. But it's bringing those tools in, bringing those sort of holding your own hand through the process,
Mm.
doing something new and fearful.
I love that, holding your own hand. There's something really poetic about that, and it feels like, how do we enable ourselves to hold our own hand? It's a little bit like, how do we give ourselves permission to do something? It's that choice point, as you said, like making a choice to face our fears, making a choice to give ourselves permission, making a choice to hold our hand as we go through life. And you said there, we can, because it's going to happen anyway. So fearful stuff is going to show up, and we can be passive in that and allow it to happen to us. Or I guess there's a with us and with our permission and with our choice, which feels a little bit more exciting. It kind of already shifts it from that fear space to that excitement space. And I get that they fire the same kind of energies, neurons, chemicals. They're very similar, but it kind of just feels more exciting already.
Mm-hmm. You used to, we've spoken about the word before, dancing with, dancing with something. It's almost like dancing with the fear.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about you is that you're embracing the fear, and then you're working with people around, but what does fear mean for them, and what does confidence mean for them, and you're doing it at the same time. So it's not like you've gone, well, I've done it, I've got all the answers. You're kind of going, I'm working it out as I do it. And how do you find that works for the people that you work with?
That's a really good question. When I first started this sort of self-development journey, I was reading from the gurus, from the people who've been doing it for years and years and years, and you learn a lot. Don't get me wrong, you do learn a lot. But I started to notice that I would expand and learn so much more quickly from people who were in the shitstorm themselves, doing it every day, who were a couple of steps ahead of me and close enough to hold my hand through the process. And that's how I started learning myself. I'm not working with my clients on things that are just so beyond my imagination. I did that years ago. I don't really care about it. It's sort of, I've got confidence in it, whatever. I'm talking to them about things that I might have stepped through a couple of months ago, a year ago, and still stepping through in different elements of my life. And I think when you are, let's use that phrase again, when you're in the middle of the shitstorm, you know what's going on. You know what that next step is going to feel like. So you support your clients, the people you work with, so much more in a way that's so much more relatable to them. This is what the next step is going to be. This is how I can hold your hand through the process.
Yeah, it feels like it feels that you're really present to them. You're really present with them in that process. And I think one of the things that I sometimes notice for myself is I'll be reading something and I'll go, wow, this person's amazing. But they're so far ahead. I have that moment of, I'm never going to get there, or it's going to take me 20 years or whatever it is to get to where they are, which can sometimes be a bit deflating. Whereas when I go, oh, wow, this happened to them last year, last month, last week, and they're alive and they're okay, you kind of go, oh, okay, then I can do that. There's something really interesting about, where are we in relationship to where our clients are, or those that we work with, so that they can see us in touching distance, as it were.
And it's worth thinking or being aware that our clients are looking at us through a very specific lens. As I think one of the biggest myths about coaches is that they've got their life together, they've got their shit sorted. And clearly it's like extremely laughable, but we might have got some of our shit together on a certain topic, but that's the lens in which our clients might look through to us, and that's the lens we might look through to our teachers, when actually
Mm.
The whole life, when you look at the whole picture, it's a way different story.
I love that. I love that idea there of, checking our filters, because I think one of the things that you're right that we do is we look at others and we go, well, they've sorted it, right? That's why they're telling us about it, because they've got it sorted, not they're sorting it. I guess maybe this is why I like Brené Brown so much. It's because in her book, she's always talking about the mistakes that she's still making. She's
Mm.
talking about the stuff that's still coming up for her, not that she's dealt with and no longer has to face. So she's living it in the moment and sharing her experience of it with us, as opposed to just going, well, I've done the work, now it's your turn.
Mm.
And I think going, I'm doing the work, it's our turn, feels so much more together, so much more so much more connected and present. We're doing this as opposed to you're doing this and I'm going to sit back because I've already done it.
Yeah, absolutely. The collaboration there is what I think it can accelerate that growth, that learning together. And I really love that you've brought up Brené Brown as an example, because she is an example of someone who has discovered so much wisdom through her own fears, through her fears of being vulnerable, of public speaking. And you might watch, I don't know, her Netflix documentary or read her book and think, this woman has got it sorted. But, if you dig a little deeper into her story, that was so not the case. And seeing where she was and where she is now. And it brings it to a point that we've discussed where if something is easy, the value isn't there in the same way as if something is really difficult. If it's been really difficult to step into a fear of, let's use the example of public speaking, once you have danced with the fear, you've stepped through it, you've sort of opened your flame to the elements to let it sort of build, and you're then in a place weeks, months, years later where you're relishing the opportunity to speak publicly. Oh my gosh, the value in stepping through that fear is just monumental.
As you were talking about that, it reminded me of I can't remember his name, but years ago, like when I was like 17 or 18, I remember working with the director. And it was when I was going to the Weekend Arts College, when it was based in Kentish Town West. And we were working on a production. It might have been like a Christmas show, or I can't quite remember, but we were working on a production, and somebody said something about fear, and he said, the stage is on fire, and you have to respect it, and it will devour you if you don't have fear. It's part of what we do. We step into that space, and that fear keeps our wits alive, keeps our instincts high, and make sure that we don't take it for granted, and we don't relax in that carefree, I don't care kind of way, because then we will be devoured by the stage. And I always remember going, wow, because he was always going, it's important to be scared. If you're not scared, you want to check what's going on, that I'm not afraid. And it kind of, I hadn't thought of him for a long time, but thinking about that reminds me of doing the firewalk and having that moment of going, my body is screaming, don't do this. But when I face it, on the other side of it, there is something magical.
Oh, I love that. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking, something that's connected to fear of an experience is respect. You're respecting that this experience you're about to step into is daunting. You're preparing yourself. There's this level of like, it's almost like an awe thing, stepping onto that fiery stage, stepping onto those fiery coals. It's just like, this is something to think about, to notice. It's not, you're not just going to skip along.
Yeah.
Or if you do, let me know your secret.
Yeah, I love that. Let's respect this thing, and also not, because it's not about going, I'm so in reverence to it that I can't embark and enjoy and be part of it. It's just going, I respect it for what it is, and I take it seriously. And it may be playful and fun, but there is also a seriousness to it, or a level of respect to it, I guess. Yeah. I love that. So when you talk about, this idea of being a confidence coach, a conference coach. I coach people on how they run their conferences.
Yeah.
No, that that confidence piece. Because I remember once having a conversation with you and you saying, I'm not always confident. And I remember going, I really like this idea that you're aware of your confidence levels and where you feel confident and where you don't. So you can pay attention to that. And I'm just curious about, how do you work with others around that? Is there a snapshot, or do you have a process or a way of working that you can share with us?
Absolutely. Well, taking a step back a bit, the point you made about me not always being confident. When I was a young child, I was very confident and very cheeky. And then through several different experiences, school, etc., that confidence, that took a massive nosedive. And for really quite a lot of years, the self-esteem, the confidence was ground zero. And it was by learning and practicing and trial and error that I had built that confidence back up. And I really lent into what it was that was holding me back, what confidence meant to me, the things, because I realized it was affecting, confidence is something that affects all areas of our life. And I was thinking, there's got to be another way. It's not just because I was born with confidence, but I lost it. So if I lost it, that means I can get it back, right?
So I'm aware I'm interrupting you there, but I just want to take a step back even from that and go, so how did you become aware of that? Because, I meet people, or I've had my own experience where you don't feel confident, but you don't necessarily gather the awareness of, but I was born with confidence. Something has happened that has removed that confidence or enabled me to lose it. So how do I regain it? People often just go, that's not me. So what was it for you that helped you to notice that?
I think it was knowing that as a child I was extremely confident, and then comparing it to who I was between the ages of 13 and 20, thinking, oh my gosh, this little child who didn't know much, didn't have much to technically, didn't know what I knew when I was between the age of 13 and 20, had confidence. She'd show up in the room, she would talk to someone she doesn't know, she'd climb the tree. And I realized, at that point I was going into interviews shaking and scared, or walking to see friends in the pub, walking in and feeling terrified, or there was just so many areas of my life that I felt so uncomfortable. And I just realized that little Marina in her dungarees and sort of floppy white hair would just take it in her stride, would just do her own thing, wouldn't care. And I was just thinking, where has that gone? So that was when I can't even remember when that moment was. It was after I'd left school. I was sort of, I think just before I did around turning 20, and I realized, oh gosh, little 6-year-old Marina would be smashing life if she was here right now. And instead I feel like I've let her down somewhat.
I love that, because often we talk about, what would we say to our younger selves? But there's something there about your younger self going, hey, come on, step up to life. We were smashing it when we were 6. Now we're 16 or 20, something else is going on. And I guess, it's also not to belittle the experiences that we have in life that create those blocks or those shifts. And it feels like what you did was you went, but I'm not going to allow those experiences to determine my future script, my future narrative. I'm going to take hold of that myself.
That was it. And through lots of trial and error. And that's where this conversation comes in. The confidence piece, the stepping up, the using my voice. Robert, even a year ago, the idea of being on a podcast like this and using my voice was terrifying. But I'm here now. I'm taking it step by step. And I'm using the lessons and the learnings, and this is what I bring into my clients. This is what I bring into the work I'm doing, learning about what are the elements that are connected, where is that? There's that element of self-respect, that self-trust, that I think a lot of the times people think of confidence as something that I know how to do it, I'm confident. You can be confident without knowing, because there's that self-trust. The word confidence comes from the word confidere, which is with trust, and we trust our parents when we're little without knowing. So it's stepping into those moments of fearfulness, of trusting. I know that I will handle myself despite the outcome, despite what will happen. And it's bringing in that trust, that compassion. If on a child's first day of school, you don't sort of chuck them in the class and say, get on with it, you'll be absolutely fine. You hold their hand, you go step by step, you explain what they might expect, you introduce them to the teacher, you say, I'll be here when you finish. You point out, why don't you go and talk to those kids over there, or look at those playing blocks over there. You bring compassion into it, you acknowledge that there's fear there, and you celebrate, and you acknowledge them for what they're doing. But we don't give ourselves that same acknowledgement, that same I got this, I'm going to be okay, I can take a step back if I want to, but I'm choosing to take a step forward.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because we often talk about, or coaches, or I maybe often talk about, how would you speak to a friend? We talk about inner critic, inner coach. That's some of the work that I do with Ivy House, where we explore a lot about, what that voice in your head, is it compassionate voice? Is it a cheerleader? Is it a coach? Or is it just somebody that's a critic telling you what you shouldn't do and how bad you've been and pulling you down? And Stuart, who is one of the facilitators, he often talks about, if that voice was your flatmate, would you still be living with them, or would you kick them out by now? And how we hold on to that voice for ourselves. And it's really interesting how we speak to ourselves, how we treat ourselves. But actually, if we were to treat ourselves how we would treat a child or a friend or a loved one, there would be a really different kind of way of showing up for ourselves. And that's, it's like, how do we show up for ourselves like we would show up for anybody else, which allows us then the ability to sit in those difficult spaces, to be fearful, but have that compassion for ourselves as well.
As a society, we feel so excited about, children discovering the world, babies. Oh my gosh, it's such a joy to see a baby. And you think, I wonder what it'll be. I wonder what it'll live through, what it'll experience. We don't give that to ourselves. We have a voice in our head thinking, I'm not worthy. I can't show up in this space. Who am I to use my voice? If we look at a baby in a pram, we don't think that. That baby is worthy simply by being. And we are excited about what it could experience, the things it could tackle, the confidence it could show, the boldness, the courage. but we forget to bring that back to ourselves now when we have so much to give to the world.
Yeah, and I love that phrase, worthy by being. You know, it often we think that we need to do something to be of worth, but actually just by being, we are of worth. And I think if we remembered that more often, it would help us in how we showed up in the world, and help us in the things that we choose to tackle. And what is it that we're going to choose to tackle in the world, and recognize that we are worthy to choose those things, and we are enough just by ourselves. We don't have to have achieved something to be enough. We are enough. And I guess as I'm thinking about this, and we're bouncing around the child and how we will speak to the child and what we were like when we are children. Sort of reminds me of that work that's part of my practice, which is this: what are we returning to? Where have we gotten lost on our path in the world? And how do we return to ourselves and who we truly are, and allow that to show up in the world?
Absolutely. And it's as you say, connecting back to ourselves, building the awareness around what you want and what you're here to create. And it's a sort of theme around self-responsibility. Going back to what we were saying about fear is going to show up anyway. So you either passively let it come to you, or you step forward. Take that responsibility, because you're worth taking that step.
Yeah.
You're worth that giving yourself the respect of making an effort, being bold, while still acknowledging that it's really, really scary.
Yeah.
You're aware of what you want. So instead of letting the fear come to you, you think, I really want to write a book one day. So I'm going to take a step towards a fear that I have in relation to that.
Yeah.
You're choosing the direction that you want to take.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's making me, as you were talking there, it's making me think about roller coasters and how we choose to get on a roller coaster. And I think part of it is because we go, well, I know that's going to end and I can get off.
Mm-hmm.
But life, it's like there is this longevity of life and experience, and we kind of go, how do I step off of that? How do I step back or away from the roller coaster of life that's happening? So if I do this thing that's fearful for me, if I do this thing that's difficult, then I'm gonna, how long am I going to be in the fearful? And it might feel like it's going to be forever. But if we go, maybe that we go, each moment is like a mini roller coaster, and it will end, and then another one will begin, and we can step off and have a drink and a burger, and then we can get back on it. And maybe there's something in giving ourselves respite from fear and anxiety so that we can rebuild, rejuvenate before we go back into things as well.
Absolutely. And as you say, actually just setting boundaries around that fear. You don't need to make this massive commitment as your first fear. And it made me think, Robert, about someone we both know, Natasha, who has sort of worked with and taught us both. She talks about an elastic band. If you're taking a massive step out of that comfort zone and it goes wrong, you ping back, and that hurts, right?
Yeah.
But if you take a little step and ping back, that's all right. So taking tiny rides on your roller coaster, you holding a child, you wouldn't sort of put your child on the, I don't know even what it's called, and like the Oblivion roller coaster. You go on the teacups first, take it slowly,
Yeah, of course. It's like, I'm not going to throw you in the most challenging. I'm going to take you through steps. And then this is interesting, isn't it? Right? Because then there's like, okay, so what's the fear that I'm going to throw myself into, which might be really scary and difficult and hard, but I've got the resilience, the resources, the support to do that. So I can throw myself in the deep end, knowing that there's a lifeguard there to help me if I get into trouble. And then what are the ones that I need to do smaller steps with. So there's also this thing of going, well, what's the fear? What's the system that sits around that fear? So how far can I go with that? What do I need to do with that? And when do I step back from that?
Mm.
So that we can, it's almost like we can approach each fear, and a bit like, I don't play golf, so I don't know why this thought's come to mind for me, but it's a bit like when I've seen people play golf where they look at the green and they go, right, so what do I need to do with this one?
Mm.
And what do I need to deal with this particular situation? And it's like, we can do that too. We can go, right, so what is this? We can have a look at the situation and go, what is it that's here? What's going on here? Okay, so what do I need to bring to do this? And let's have a chat with my caddy. I know that word. Let's have a chat with my caddy to see what they think about this. And your caddy might be your coach, might be your mentor, might be your support system. And you go, oh, okay, so this one, I need to take a big swing at this one. Or actually, this is just a little one. Oh, there's something interesting in that, in what are the systems around us that we use to explore that fear, to decide what do we bring to it? What do we need in order to tackle it? And sometimes we don't know. So we have to take everything with us just in case.
And as you're talking about that, bring in a whole nother element, the wisdom that you're sharing around stepping into the fear, just doing the step by step. That's something you would have learned by doing it wrong, making mistakes, as we've spoken about within human design, where the weaknesses come, that's where you learn about the wisdom. So we know that actually for you, Robert, it's about taking smaller steps, smaller commitments before the bigger commitment, giving yourself time.
Yeah. It's like I think of it like as like a little bit of a run up. It's like I take these little steps, test the water, and then I can do the leap.
Yeah.
If I just try and do the leap, it's like that doesn't quite work. But it's like, what are the things that I need to do? And then for me, it's like once I get into the stride of it, it's like, right, then I'm just doing these huge bounds around it, and then I get to something else. I go, oh, what are the little steps I need to take around this?
And if you don't take those little steps, you'd pull a muscle doing the big bounds anyway.
Yeah. And then you're laid up for a week or a month or whatever it is, because you go, oh, that really hurt, or I really buckled on that one. How do I come back from that? Right, I need to go away and rejuvenate. And then there's the learning, right? There's the learning. It's going, okay, that was too big a leap. Right, let me halve that or quarter that or whatever it is, and try that step. And one of the things that I'm really aware of at the moment is it's like, we're filming this on the 22nd of December, and where I'm in that phase of just bringing everything to a close as we go into the holidays, and then thinking about what does next year look like. And there are some things where I'm going, okay, I'm actually going to reduce some of those things, because they were great ideas, great leaps, but I realized that I don't have the energy to sustain them. So it's like, what do I pull back on so that I can build that momentum to move through things and to leap into other things? And looking at that not as failure, but as learning and understanding. Because I think this is the other thing about fear is we fear failure. So part of our fear system is, what if I can't do this? What if I get this wrong? As opposed to, what can I learn from trying this and exploring this that allows me to do it better as I move through?
Yeah. Absolutely. And we also fear, fear isn't just around actively doing something, but it's around letting things go. Letting things go, because if I stop doing that, will I be less worthy? If I say no to my boss on this project, will they, there's a fear around saying no and letting things go and releasing things as well.
I love that, what is it we're afraid to let go of? As you know, on one of my programs, I talk a lot about what might we need to let go of so that actually we can take off and fly. and what are the weights that are holding us down and stopping us from doing that. And we think, at some point those weights were useful. Maybe they kept us grounded or they kept us safe at some point, but now they're just a weight.
Yeah.
And how do we let go of those so that we can take off? How do we let go of those beliefs, those ideas that hold us back? And I, one of the things that I think that's really interesting about your work is because you are a step ahead, but you're close enough to be connected to and be present with, it allows people to feel safe in your presence. So you kind of create this aura of community, of safety, of connection. So we feel supported around you. And I think there's something really interesting about, when we feel fear and we don't feel supported, we don't feel like somebody's got our back, it's really hard to do it. But I know that, from working with you, that there's this real, it feels like you're right there with us, supporting us in that moment. And it's like, there's an amazing level of connectedness that you bring into your work.
Thank you so much. That's so wonderful to hear. I think it's something, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's something we all need, It's another, we keep on going back to learning and being children, but when a parent is teaching us how to ride a bike, we've got stabilizers. If we fall off, they encourage us to get back on again. They're holding our hand through the process. They've done it,
Yeah.
It's this thing of, I'm now at a stage, and don't get me wrong, there are still things that scare me so much. I can't even think about doing them right now. But I'm at a stage where I'm thinking, there's a fear here. This is exciting because it's a tool I can use. So it's bringing that element of reframing in, and going back to what we discussed at the beginning, changing the narrative. I know that actually I value more learning and being able to support my clients than I do indulging in my fearfulness and sitting back and not taking action. I would rather be uncomfortable and be so nervous of doing something than potentially holding something back that I can give to someone else.
And it's like you're using yourself as your own test bed for how things work out, so you can report back. It's like you're like the scout. You're going out and you're having a look and seeing what the land's like, and you're coming back and going, this is what it looks like out there. And we go, okay, let's go a couple of steps. And then you go off again. You go, right, this is what it looks like out there. And there's something. So I guess is it refreshing? Is refreshing the word I'm looking for? Maybe it's rewarding that somebody's doing that. That somebody's checking what the road is like ahead for us. But also that they're coming back and letting us know what that's like, as opposed to going, oh, they're off. Because I guess sometimes when we think about personal development or this kind of that sort of world, that sometimes we see people just disappear off into the distance, and we go, oh, okay, that's them gone and living their life, but there's no coming back and sharing and exploring with us. And part of what you're doing is you're going, but I'm going to keep coming back. I'm going to keep that circle flowing. So you catch up with me, but then I go off, and then it's this kind of, so I'm just a bit ahead. Maybe it's that way.
Yeah. This is where the self-awareness has come in to support me with this as well, because okay, let's connect back to human design. My profile in human design has a 6 in it. So before the age of 30, I'm drawn to trial and error. I'm trying all the things, I'm experiencing all the things. If you've got a 3 in your profile, you're the same. And so using tools like human design, other self-awareness, let me feel more comfortable within the fear, within the thing.
That's interesting, isn't it? It's like going, right, what are the tools that I have and how do I use those tools to support me in the things that I'm doing? So I'm new to the human design world, and I've been loving the sort of um, the journey that we've been on together as you've kind of taken me through. What does this? What does my human design mean for me? And the kind of, I was going to say coincidences. I don't know if they are coincidences. The synchronicities as we've explored it and gone, oh, okay, that's why you do that. Well, that's
Mhm.
interesting. And now you know that you can make a choice about it and you can apply it and you can work with it as opposed to it happening to you. So when you think about human design and you think about fear or human design and confidence, what's, and maybe this is too big a question. Maybe this is like a whole nother hour of conversation. But what's the sort of relationship do you notice in that?
Mm. So I see that our confidence and specifically our wisdom lies within the elements of our chart which could be considered as weaknesses.
Hmm.
And it's so empowering because instead of, let's use an example of having an open solar plexus. So you have this undefined or open solar plexus, which means that you take in and amplify emotions very easily. And that can be really difficult if you're working with people who are difficult. It tends to
Hmm.
turn people into people pleasers. But instead of going into a situation saying, I'm not doing this because I've got an open solar plexus, I can't possibly, I've got an awareness of how my body works. I
Hmm.
know that this is how I will feel. I know that I'll take in. So I'm going to choose to let go of what doesn't belong to me. I'm going to choose to be
Hmm.
wise about it, to acknowledge it. I'm going to be the sift, not the sponge. And then when you're in that place and you learn how to do that, you meet someone else who is struggling with that, and you can step through that with them. You can say, I feel what you feel. I've been there, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to choose to let it go after we experience it. We're not closing ourselves. We're not stepping away from opportunities. We're leaning into the opportunities with the knowledge of how we work.
Hmm. I love that with the knowledge of how we work, because that then, yeah, that phrase really rings and resonates for me because it then sends us on a quest of, so how do I work? What is my system, whether it's from a physical intelligence perspective or a three principles perspective or human design perspective or transactional analysis or a narrative perspective, but going, so how does my system work? I can choose the tool or the frame or the paradigm from which to view it. But by getting curious on the self, then when we show up in situations, we can pay attention and go, oh, I know I'm going to do this. I know this is my thing, and it causes me to do whatever. Okay, so I'm aware of that. I bring the wisdom to it, the knowledge, the awareness, the understanding, and I make choices in that and go, I know I'm going to be a bit anxious around these new people, let's say. So I might share my anxiety, or I might say, oh, this feels a bit being around different people. How do you feel about it? Instead of allowing that anxiety to cause us to step back, but allow our knowledge of it, our knowingness around ourselves to enable us to step forward and experiment and test and see how we're showing up and how we're being in the world. Oh, oh.
It's juicy.
Yeah, it really is because it feels like it feels like it shift in my mind. I'm noticing there's a bit of a shift happening where I'm going back into a thought around what it's all a bit of an experiment. It's all research. And so if we just go out into the world and do our research about how we show up in the world and what works and what doesn't work for us, and we just pay attention to that, then all of a sudden it stops being a scary place and it becomes more a curious place.
Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of going, oh, I remember, I did a theatre project a million years ago, which was called The Experiment, because we were like, we don't know what we're going to do. So why don't we call it an experiment? And we invited people to come along and join the experiment. And it created this beautiful piece of theatre. But we knew that by calling it an experiment, we were never going to get it wrong. There was no wrong in there. There was just learning and exploration. And it kind of resonating for me, especially now, kind of going, being a year as a freelancer, going, it's a lot of trial and error. But if we just go, it's an experiment. It's a game that we're going to play and we're going to enjoy. Then it shifts things.
That's it. See it as a game. Bring the fun in. I mean, ultimately, Robert, we're animals living on a floating rock. Come on, let's bring the lightness. Let's try. Let's go out on stage, speak. What's the worst that can happen? Let's have fun.
Yeah.
Lean into it. Experiment. Play games. Dance with it.
Oh, yeah. And see where it then takes us. See where we go with that, and then do our next dance or do our next bit of, crunching the data, the analysis from that experiment, and then go, right, what's my next experiment? Yeah. And all the while paying attention to how we show up and going, am I able to be committed to my experiment, or does that not really work for me? Do my experiments need to be random, or can they be plotted out over time? But even in that, paying attention to that and going, right, so okay, how do I challenge myself in that? As opposed to go, I'm a creative, I don't really plan stuff. Go, wait a minute, how do I challenge that? Or what is my fear around planning? Is there a fear around that it will become boring and the spontaneity will shift out of it? But actually, you can leave space for that. Oh, gosh, this has been like one of those. I love these conversations because I don't know about the listeners and the watchers, but I'm learning so much about myself as we're going through this. This is great.
Yeah, so much fun. This is the reward in itself, and this is where we're speaking, we're sharing, we're learning, and we're creating this space in which people can be like, oh, maybe I can step into fear. Yeah. Maybe I can do that thing.
Yeah. And what's the baby step that they need to take to begin that, to see that? It's a bit like, how do they take the run up to take the leap? Yeah. And how long's their run up?
I want to acknowledge, even listening to a podcast or watching a video that has the word fear in is scary. Even taking the step by listening this far, listening to 5 minutes of it, that's scary. Congratulate yourself.
Yeah.
The more you do that, the more you acknowledge and celebrate and congratulate yourself, and you feel fearful, the more you begin to associate fear with positive, with celebration. So start by doing it now. Doing it with us talking on this episode, of people watching it every moment.
Yeah, beautiful, lovely. So we're going to come back and have more conversations around fear and around courage and around challenge. I know we're going to have more conversations around human design, because that's something that we're both, you're taking me through at the moment, and I think there's something really interesting about what I'm learning on that, and it would be great later on down the line to kind of share our learnings around me and my experiment with it. But if people want to get hold of you. If people want to work with you, where do they find you? And I'm gonna do a terrible coaching thing and ask you lots of questions all at the same time. How do we find you? Where do we find you? What are you doing right now? What are you doing next? Answer any and all of those.
Amazing, Robert. Thank you. So, my name is Marina Oswald. You can find me on Instagram at Talk with Marina. My website is www.talkwithmarina.com. Did I say too many W's?
No, there were 3. You're good.
Good. There are 3 W's. In terms of what's coming up next, in terms of getting in contact with me, send me a DM, send me an email. You can find the details on my website, on my Instagram. What's coming up next is on the 9th of January, I am running Confidence Kit, the group program on building confidence. This is my signature program. I run it again and again. So if you miss this one, that's totally not a problem. Put your name on the waiting list for the next one, and I would love for you to join. As Robert mentioned, I do human design readings, and I combine all of this, the mindset, confidence, human design reading, and bringing a little bit of tarot here and there within my signature programs. So have a look, get in touch, and I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions from this episode as well, let me know. I'm here to answer.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Maybe next time we'll talk tarot as well.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have cards with us. Oh, I've got a whole plan growing. I'll save that for next time. So it's been a real pleasure sharing the space with you and kind of leaning into being confident with you and seeing you glow with confidence and facing those fears and supporting people to do that, which I just think is amazing. And it's like, you know, when I think about Fan the Flames, and I think about this idea that we're following our sparks, where we're paying attention to our potential and we're going, what is it that I need to grow that into my roaring fire? What is it that I need to do to make that happen? And I recognize that sometimes there is fear there. And so, you know, having listened to Marina, there's this idea of, okay, so how do we lean into our fear? What's the little step that we need to take with our fears? What's the tools that we need to bring with us to not manage our fear? Because I don't think it's about managing it, but just that help us to sit with it and to lean into it and to do it. So if you're interested in that work, then reach out and have a conversation with Marina. And here at Fan the Flames, we've got exciting things happening, exciting things coming over the next year. So keep an eye out for that. And one of those exciting things is a webpage. I'm actually going to get my webpage done so you can actually see what I'm up to and connect with me there. But until then, depending on when you're listening to this, have a wonderful holiday season. Take care out there in the world. Marina, thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everybody, and have a great day.